Welcome to an episode of Inner Work Guide's Alchemical Gnosis, Yoga of the West. I'm your host, John H. Reed III. Let's get to it. I was recently asked by a traveler who completed Air 2 what to expect in the work, or as he put it, do you have any advice on what comes next? First, let's visit my definition of the work concerning alchemical gnosis, which is alchemical gnosis is the process of using alchemical medicines of the soul with conscious intent within the paradigm of Hermetic philosophy, with the goal of stimulating and opening the human body's spiritual energy centers in order to establish knowledge of and communication with your inner master. A lot of people become fixated on the first part of the phrase about using alchemical medicines of the soul and want the magic pill that will transform them and remove all problems and obstacles from their life. Of course, all I've claimed is that you will be able to establish knowledge of and communication with your inner master. And a lot of people still believe in the fallacy that spiritual work removes turmoil from their life, when indeed I've found that it makes what we would call turmoil more salient. Why should it not? I tell all my travelers the friction is the conversation. Discomfort is a tool that divinity uses to get your attention in a direct manner because comfort causes one to lower their guard and induces a sense of investigative indolence. Inner work is often symbolically illustrated as stirring the riverbed. Anyone who has done a modicum of laboratory work and gone through the process of extracting salts from ash to obtain water-soluble salts knows that the riverbed never disappears. You can continually go back to it and agitate the now settled settlement again, causing the silt to disperse into the menstruum, where awareness extracts more soluble material to apprehend. You can carry the process out dozens or hundreds of times on a pile of ash, and when you think you've pulled everything out of it, the ash can be calcined once again and the process repeated anew. Of course, each time when the wheel turns, less and less material is delivered until eventually the matter delivers nothing at all. Even then, the wise artist knows what to do, and all they have to do is switch a menstruum to something other than water to perform the extraction. Interestingly enough, I've noticed that the more depleted the silk gets, the thinner and the more sheer the silk cloud appears during agitation. But the point here is this. The silt is always there, and so there's always inner work to be done. Now, you might think, I'm saying that inner work causes a never-ending cascade of tumult in one's life, when that is not the case, because the silt does settle back down to the bottom between operations. Indeed, life circumstance is the thing that usually does the stirring and not us. Because we are now seeking understanding of the event, we see it as a means of communication between us and the divine. So it's no longer an adversarial event, but rather a dialogue. This is what I meant when I said the inner work makes turmoil more salient. One thing is for certain, irrespective of our state of illumination, we must all chop wood and carry water each day. The first step in this process is to lower oneself into the great sea and experience without judgment or favor the truth of themselves, and most importantly, their inner thought, processes, and feelings. These two are the brick and mortar that we use to construct the reality of our lives. So being exposed to them enables us to differentiate them, communicate with them, and eventually learn from them about ourselves. One of the things we introduce travelers to in Air 1 and Air 2 work is the fact that we lose at least an order of magnitude of telemetry from our sensorium each second that we take information in, and it moves from our unconscious state to our conscious perception. That's a lot of information and thus power that we are leaving on the table simply because we're not even aware that it's there for our use. The two modes we use to establish conscious connection with the unused part of ourselves is through the vigil of nature and also our morning and evening body awareness exercises. While on the surface these two things seem simple, it's actually one of those wax-on, wax-off routines that forms the foundation of all future work. By becoming conversant with our own internal thoughts and emotions, we gain access to the very things we use to create our daily reality from. Because while it's true we all live in this universe together as one, we are each also a universal creation engine in our own right. Therefore, it is incumbent upon each of us to learn to properly use this wonderful gift. My experience is that control comes from awareness. That is, the more I become conversant and aware of a particular energy, the more I can decide to allow it to flow or not in any given situation. That control begins then to show up in the circumstances and outcomes of daily life in a way that is markedly different than what one experienced in their life before their inner nascent awareness. Mind you, it's not because of some incantation or formula. Rather, your internal relationship with the energy has changed, and that allows it to coalesce in ways that it had not been able to do before. The fact is this: the lesson comes, and once it is understood, the energy rearranges itself for the next lesson. I have experienced numerous of these types of occurrences in my life, the more my mental disposition has moved to a view of the world that Hermeticists call the vision of Hermes, which essentially boils down to the perspective of seeing each and every daily occurrence as a dialogue and interaction of the divine with one's soul. The first stage, then, is learning to plumb the depths of one's internal world. The second stage is a natural outcome of the first stage. In the second stage, a degree of conscious control of matter is granted. In a Philosophers of Nature seminar back in the 1990s, it was stated that at this stage one is given some control over the weather and physical interaction. The first of these, control of the weather, I think is rather subjective at best. At least it has always been for me. Now, there have been times when it was starting to rain and we were having a picnic or we were outside barbecuing, and my wife or daughter said, "Man, I really wish we had just another hour." To which I replied, "We have that hour, but must be in sight at the stroke of the hour's end." And sure enough, the weather would hold off for an hour, and then, as if a pent-up frustration were being released, the storm blew in with an unusual amount of fury. The second example mentioned in the seminar concerned distillation and that small singular bubble that will form on the surface of the liquid in the distillation flask around the fourth or fifth distillation. And I've seen this with ethanol. That's what Du Bois was talking about in the Philosophers of Nature seminar back in the 90s. And so because the mercury is associated with mind and information, and by mercury I mean ethanol. That's what we call mercury in alchemy. It's plant alchemy. It's ethanol is called mercury. And because the mercury is associated with the mind and information, it is sensitive to the will of the artist. One can get that bubble to move in a desired pattern. It can be made to hold dead center, move in a linear fashion from point A to point B and then from point B to point A, to move touching 3 points of the flask to form a triangle, and the same with 4 points to form a square. The most I've been able to do is a pentagram. This last test is rather objective, and as I say, it flows naturally as the outcome of the practice we've been discussing. So we've covered the elements of water and earth, but what about air and fire? Well, the ancients tell us that during the next stage of development in the air element, we begin to experience universal consciousness, a connection to all life and thus the various streams of thought and emotion emanating from all things. One of the things you quickly find out when doing inner work is that everything is alive. Even rocks have an intelligence and information they can share with you if you know how to access it. Remember, though, we live in a polar universe and everything has its positive and negative connotations. While you are becoming more lucid in your understanding of what instigates your actions and even the actions of others, those others are still, for the most part, asleep. Or as Morpheus said in The Matrix, anyone who's not us and is still plugged in has the potential to be an agent, i.e. your enemy. So many an argument and fight can result in pointing out to a person what they are doing and the inevitable outcome, or for that matter, how their perspective is actually feeding their frustration. I mean, you actually get to see very clearly, in a linear fashion almost, how a person's actions are going to lead to a certain thing. And I mean, this is above and beyond the normal stuff. All I can say is friends and family will begin to say that you've changed, and usually for the worse. And that's because your interpretation of events is going to be counterintuitive to what the normal, everyday person experiences. And that's going to hold true for the majority of people. They're not going to see a lesson in it. They're just going to see an enemy. This thing happened. It was something that came out of the blue, and I had no control over it. When actually about 90% of the stuff that we go through, we're the author of it. Most people don't want to hear that and don't want to learn anything about it. So one thing's for sure, you're going to learn to become circumspect with your knowledge and realize that old adage that silence is golden. The last stage, that of the fire element, is really the crux of all the work. Though what lifetime you achieve it in, nobody knows. It's achievable. People have done it, and it might happen in this incarnation or in 100 incarnations down the line for you. But in modern parlance, we would call such individuals a mind walker or force ghost, because they've learned to separate their consciousness from their bodies and to maintain consciousness after death. They can then incarnate with access to their essential parts of past memories and work from previous lives. This access, though, is spontaneous occurrence that happens in an individual's life, usually soon after the onset of puberty in their newer incarnation. But of course, one can never constrain how the one will express itself in any one person's life. Indeed, if the one needs the rocks to cry out and speak the truth, so will it be. Thank you for listening to this episode of Inner Work Guide's Alchemical Gnosis, Yoga of the West. Don't forget to follow or subscribe. Visit our website at www.innergarden.org. For more information about Hermetic training in practical laboratory alchemy or inner work, write to info@innergarden.org.